Ready, dudes?
Yeah, I'm ready. Are we good?
We're good. We're live.
We're live.
We're live.
On. Hello, everyone.
Hey,
Welcome
everyone.
to part 6 of the mapping series.
Yeah, the live podcast part of the series. We'll also be airing this after we shoot it tonight, as in right now, on the YouTube channel in a couple of days. All right, one of the first questions that we got real quick from Dennis Eddy Jr. Do you hunt map deer differently depending on the time of the year? Early season versus rut versus late season. What are you looking for besides food sources on the maps during that time? I would say we definitely do. We definitely map
Map them differently.
Yeah, it says map/hunt.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously we're looking at different things on the map depending on the time frame of the year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But always looking for hunting pressure, access points and stuff.
Yeah, I'd say pressure definitely. I know we were just talking about the other day. It seems to really just push them all into one hole by the end of the year. And that's just the nature of how deer live when it gets cold out, too. I think they just yard up and live in a small area. But pressure definitely has an impact on that. So
Yeah. I mean, some of our, most productive areas, like where I shot that buck, that area was so far back in there. You had to cross a bunch of hills. And by that point in the rut, it was, I think I ended up shooting him on November 19th. But we were hunting from the 15th to the 19th back in there. And it was the deepest little corner pocket of the public land. And, that's where all the deer were. And it still kind of always is going to relate back to that pressure, you know. And I would say even more so at that time of the year. By Thanksgiving and gun seasons and stuff, we're really, that is ultimately, what we're looking at. It's how can we get to the deepest hole?
Yeah.
And that's kind of when it starts getting fun, too, because once you find that hot spot, it's
a
generally the hot spot.
It took us 2 or 3 years to find that little hole back in there.
Well,
and
just
every year in the middle of the rut now, it's loaded with deer.
just think about all the deer that you and Brody killed last year. We were really hot on those deer. They're all kind of all stacked down that little bottom.
Yep. Bradley says, like the mapping series, he's had Onyx since last year and love it. Thanks, Bradley. I will make a quick point to plug Onyx and our promo code right here. Jake just pinned our promo code. You can save 20% on the Onyx Hunt app at onyxmaps.com by using the promo code capital T, capital H, capital P. It only works on onyxmaps.com. Okay, next question. Will a buck exit its bed in the afternoon with the wind behind his back or walking into the wind?
I would say we're not necessarily – we're looking more at – if we're looking at a bed, we're looking more at maybe a specific thing that we would expect him to do out of that bed on a given day. So maybe if, the white oaks, maybe it's a windy day, cold front day, and it just knocked a bunch of white oak acorns out of the tree. That's where we're going to maybe hunt him first. Maybe it's a hot day, and we think that he's going to go to water. Maybe it's,
There's a fresh cut cornfield
crop fields, doe bedding areas, depending on the time of the year.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a hot community scrape really close to his bedding area that he's going to hit.
What's up, Hayden? Thanks for joining, man. Ian just asked a good question. Have you guys ever intentionally bumped bedded bucks and set up to kill them coming back to the bedding area, bump and dump? Yeah, we actually just did a seminar on that at Deer Fest. Well, sort of about that. We briefly just discussed it.
It came up a lot.
But you learn so much every time you bump them, especially during the season.
Yeah.
Like if you bump a big one during the season, they're going to give you so much information at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, even last year when we bumped those two early, when these guys were set up with no tag and had that big one come right underneath them.
Now we know for
like
next
now
year.
we know the next time there's
year.
Acorns dropping in those woods with that wind,
we
can
talk
go
about
back in there.
Zach's Nebraska buck from last year all the time, but we were intentionally wind bumping that area, and we jumped a buck, and that's where we ended up killing that buck.
Yeah,
so
and we talked about the Missouri buck that went through the river on us.
I guess the answer
in the
could be
seminar.
yes for that.
Yeah.
Either way, even if you're doing it intentionally or not, always make sure to take note of it. I'd say.
Yep.
Maybe we weren't intentionally on some of them. Obviously the buck in Missouri that we jumped across the creek, we would have rather not done that. But at the same time, if we wouldn't have done that, dude, we might have not even been in the game.
We should have killed that thing the next day. We almost killed a buck that night, a different buck coming out of that bedding area. If that guy wouldn't have climbed down and boogered him, I was almost getting ready to draw on that thing.
Yeah, he was 35
And then the
yards.
very next night, we had the same buck come out of the exact bed that we bumped him out of the night before, walk right up the ridge, and if we would have just been 15 yards further, we would have probably got an arrow flung at him.
Zach's dad's got a good point right there.
Doug is asking,
He's telling.
been showing he's telling, yes. Been showing the Onyx maps to non-hunters. It's a great tool for anyone. I use it to find out who owns private land and then go after permission.
Mm-hmm.
That is true.
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing, if you're hunting or fishing or whatever, hiking, it's a super useful tool. Will bucks bed in an oxbow facing the creek river with the wind at their back?
Yes.
Yes, they will. I think Greg even has a map of it. You'll see what we're talking about here. I think I marked some beds at the points of the oxbows.
Mm-hmm.
Like if a river is meandering, for instance, and it's going straight, and then it makes a bend, almost like a U shape, wouldn't you call it?
Mm-hmm.
Right around the tip of that U-shaped bend, there's going to be washes out in the sides of the bank, and those eventually, they create deep spots and shallow spots.
Mm-hmm.
And those shallow spots deer will use to cross. So bucks will bed right on the tip of that U.
Basically,
With the wind blowing in from the land side, and then use the creek as an escape route.
the outside bend of a river is always going to create a deep spot, but right off of that, there's generally a shallow spot. So when they're bedding there, they can escape either side of that bend in the river, and that's a lot of times why they're going to bed there, and they can see two, pretty long stretches down that river.
It's real interesting once you get out there and start finding. We learned that from Dan Infalt and the Hunting Beast guys a few years ago, and went in there and started scouting some of the river bedding that we had in our area and found them just right where these dots are on the map that we've got pulled up, for you guys right now. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're watching down that creek. When you think about it, they rarely have predators coming from that river most of the time. And it's an easy way for them to escape. With the wind blowing in from the land side, then many times they'll stand up and they'll either go down across the river or they'll come back out the front of that U.
Mm-hmm. I would say
you're hunting it just off wind if you're trying to hunt them on the front end of the U. We constantly get we had another question on here a minute ago, we've got this kind of comment on a lot of these videos. We constantly get the comment that says, oh, my area has too much pressure. You guys are finding areas where there's no people, or no way you could come here and do that because there's just too much pressure. Most of the areas that we scout have a fair amount of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Pressure actually helps us, in determining the best spot. Now, granted, if it's completely overrun, a hunter every 20 yards throughout the entire piece, that may be different.
A lot of times, if deer will live on a piece of public, I would say at least until the gun seasons, there is going to be deer on that property.
Yeah.
They're going to be there. Now I've seen where after gun seasons it gets pretty sparse, but, it's like if the habitat's there, there's going to be deer there until, like I said, at least till the gun season when people are really pushing them out of there.
Yeah, don't necessarily get discouraged if you pull into an area and there's trucks in the parking lot, in bow season or something like that, or even in gun season. You just have to learn how to use that pressure to your advantage, whether it's public or private, because they're going to avoid it. But they're, like we were just mentioning with the whole path thing, many times they're not avoiding it by very far at all. One of the better spots that we got on this small piece right outside of town is 60 yards from the parking lot, 30 yards from the road. We just got a question, how do you determine an off-wind setup in hill country? And I've got a map pulled up here on the screen. I don't know if you can cut to it, Greg. I got hill country map pulled up here, and I've got there's the topo feature. I'll kick it over to the hybrid feature here. When you're hunting a just off wind, regardless of the setup in hill country or flat land or farm or whatever, that means that you're basically giving the deer the wind. Like your wind is blowing in his general direction, but you're set up off to just one side, just far enough where your wind is blowing past him. And sometimes it's only a matter of yards. And in hill country like this,
threading the needle is really a good way to put it. You're basically just trying to barely get it past them. It's risky as heck, but a lot of times they're not going to be there unless it has that wind. That's just pretty much period, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll add a waypoint here. Say, for example, a buck is bedded on this point right there. He's going to be laying there with a south-southeast wind or a south wind coming straight down that point, right? He'll lay there, and in order for us to hunt that, we have to drop off one side or the other of the ridge and hunt the side of the hill with that wind blowing just off his bedding location and then trying to kill him before he gets up to that spot. You know,
Right.
sometimes he'll stand up and he'll walk up the point of that ridge. But
Exit out of that. That's confusing.
yeah, sorry about that.
Maybe drop another pin and
Where we
draw
would
a
set
line
up.
of where the wind would be blowing even.
Yep. Like here's a potential setup maybe further up here along
Trying
that,
to catch him on the head of that ditch even.
right on the head of the ditch, because there'll probably be a trail right there. I'll just put this little blind thing right there. Right there, you got a little transition in habitat too. I mean, that's very possibly a bedding area right on the point of that hill. And if you're set up right there with your wind blowing from the south, it's going to blow right past him. And, I mean, that's how close you are, though. Many times when you're hunting just off wind, you can see the line I just drew on there that's kind of going from south to north with a southerly wind. It's blowing right past him in his bed. And that's for an evening hunt, you know, or I guess, or a morning hunt, like to your point.
Yeah.
But you're constantly in hill country like that. If you're hunting a bedding area, you're giving them some of the wind. I mean, because that's the leeward side of the hill. If you're hunting that little blind point that I marked on a north wind, chances are they're clear down to the south of you there.
Yeah.
On the opposite side of that ridge. They're going to be over in here on a north wind.
I think that's the fun part about the wind, you know, and how they bed based off the wind is you can just straight up eliminate a whole hillside just simply because the wind's not set up for them. I mean, they're just not going to bed. It just makes eliminating areas of, you know, when you're scouting for certain setups or whatever, it just makes that a lot easier.
Does it mess up the deer when y'all get in the beds? No. We get that question a lot of the time.
For that day.
Yeah, I mean, for that particular
We
day.
usually don't crawl in there with them.
Yeah, and that was another thing. We got
I'd
a
love
comment.
I'd love to.
We got a comment earlier today from somebody that was like, first thing you guys ought to do is not crawl into the beds and leave your scent around in the beds. Well,
I mean,
you just let your scent go out of there and don't
that buck
keep
I
messing
shot
on it.
2 days before or 3 days before I shot him,
Walked into the
I
beds.
was crawling all over his bed. And
Beds, all of them.
And boy, you better believe I was stinking at that point. That was 6 or 7 days without showering. So yeah, I mean, he was right back in there.
Yeah.
Like I just try to cut all ties with making or feeling like that is such a bad thing because we just find it isn't.
Yeah, it's on our YouTube channel. That hunt that he's referring to, it's the Nebraska public land hunt, and it's a 6 or 7 part video series towards the start of the 2017 public land video journal. I believe is the playlist name.
And we talked about everything that we did. We have footage of me laying in bed.
It'd be a lot easier for them or you guys to understand if you go back and watch it.
Right. But yeah, I mean, we basically say that you got one chance to go in there and figure things out. You go in there, you gum around, walk it through it, stink it up, do whatever, but you got to learn how the deer are using that bedding area and how the trails are, which direction they're going, leaving the bedding area. Like, you learn so much by doing that.
Oh, yeah, let's put it this way.
And they come right back. You just, in most cases, I would say. But
we never scout an area and then we're just like, we better go sit in that bed again. No, we don't do that. We do it once a year. We kind of make our assumptions for the season, and then maybe we revisit it again the following year, but we're not just going to keep going rolling back in that bed just to see what he can see. Well, if we don't figure it out the first time, then we didn't try scouting hard enough.
I mean, if you're traveling and hunting somewhere else, you got to be even more aggressive. You know, because you only got maybe you have a week's vacation that you took. If you spend the first 4 or 5 days of your hunt just pecking around the edges and the rim and never get in there tight and push the envelope on the bedding areas, you may only end up with, one chance towards the end of your hunt. Where if you're pushing the envelope immediately and trying to get in there and figure out what's going on, you're going to have a lot better odds. At least that's what we've seen so far. The thing is, guys, we used to hunt really conservatively.
Yeah. Or at least a lot more conservatively than we do now.
Yeah, and just in the last 5-6 years, we've gotten more and more aggressive because we've seen as a group that works more often.
And it's not. and it's not slowing down, like Jake just said.
No.
Like it's getting even more aggressive. Like you find a stand on the outside of a bedding area. Well, we're going to be in the bedding area. Yeah. We're not going to be on the edge anymore. We're going to get in it. And I think that the more and more aggressive you get, the more you learn, faster the process of learning is, in efficiency. That's the beauty of it. I think it's efficiency.
How can you determine what season the buck is using the bed? That's a good question.
Rubs is one very, very good starting
Especially early
point
in the year.
because
Hey, Todd.
because you got to think about it. A bed in the summer is not going to have rubs in it because they're not making rubs. And, like in Nebraska, that was one of the main things we were looking for, an early opener when we were finding fresh rubs. They were the first rubs of
That
the
meant
year.
the deer were there right now.
That means bucks are here now.
Because they just lost their velvet.
And we would trail those back into bedding areas, and that's how our whole strategy was based off of.
Food source going to change.
Food,
does.
water and everything.
They're just going to move around in most cases throughout the course of the year. And that's why every single time you find a bedding area, the first thing we start with is hunting pressure, and then you look for the areas where that doesn't exist. And then you go in there, find bedding, and you think about when that deer is using it. Mm-hmm. If it's in a big stand of hardwoods in the hills, he's probably using those bedding areas when acorns are dropping. Mm-hmm. If it's, down in the marsh or down in the creek bottoms or something, he may be using it when they're browsing on that on a low acorn year.
These beds that we just found around the corn in the video we just posted,
yeah.
they're not going to be bedded there when that corn's gone.
No,
I know
right.
that.
The cover's gone.
There's just so many different factors, and I guess really we hate to not give you the answer that you're looking for, but the more and more you do this kind of stuff, you're looking at these maps, you're looking for the pressure, you're looking for the beds, the more it's going to just really start to narrow it down. And like I said, we hate to not be able to give you a more defined answer. It's just very, very situational.
How do you know which are beds of 2-year-olds and which are beds of 3+-year-old bucks?
If it's the best one in the area, and that just basically means if it sets up, in our opinion, or if it sets up, in our opinion, to be the best bedding area, then that's what we assume is going to be the mature buck. Or if we spook one out of it, and that's where the mature buck is. Find big beds, big tracks.
Big buck turds.
Big rubs,
big
real
rubs.
high on the tree rubs.
In a spot where nobody ever goes, when he lay in the bed and you envision that buck laying there on a specific wind direction with cover to back and everything that he can see, if it's just a bulletproof spot, it's very hard to get to. Those are the best ones. Mm-hmm. When you find a bed and you start really thinking about how in the heck am I going to hunt this thing on this wind?
And you can't figure it out until you get home.
Right.
Or maybe you never figure it out.
Yeah. Those are the ones that usually hold the biggest ones.
So you'd never get them.
And then if you go there and hunt and the 2-year-old stands up, just shoot him because he's probably the biggest one in there anyway.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I'm doing.
Hey, that's another reason. That's really my main reason I like trail cameras. I don't get attached to anything.
Yep. What do you guys typically do if you find a good buck bed but have no good tree within reasonable distance? Ground and pound.
Yep.
Find a way.
Yep.
That's what you do. You either find a way to have somebody swing around that bed and wind bump him to you, or you slide in there.
Actually, really cool story from Jared. Jared was the guy that I talked to at the Deer Fest. He was like telling me this story where he saw a buck bed down, and it was windy, but it was too open. He felt to go, but he went. He was gonna shoot this buck, and he was like super, anxious watching this deer. He tried grunting, couldn't hear him. Eventually, his dad was coming to work that day, or coming to work on the farm, and he bumped him towards him.
Yep.
He was driving along the edge, drove along the edge, and bumped him towards him. So that's definitely
there's
a
will,
sound
there's a
strategy.
way. There's a way to do it. You just got to think outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, if you just pick the perfect tree, but it's not in the perfect spot, not going to do you any good because he ain't going to get that far in daylight 99% of the time.
A lot of times with these spots, you can get away with more than you think of because these deer are not expecting anybody to be there. So they're not sometimes even looking up like Dan talks about in those cattails. Those deer are just walking with their heads down, and you're 6 feet up in a dead tree, but they're not looking because they can't see anything anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like we were talking about the Nebraska buck having no clue, that's not a 7-year-old buck, but he still feels so comfortable there that he's not paying any attention. Same thing with bigger, older bucks, too. When they feel comfortable there, and they are not paying much attention to anything else. They're comfortable.
I got another one here. Is there any way that you could break down a piece of public in the South at some point? Yes, we will be. We'll be hunting in Alabama later on.
We'll break it down.
We'll break it down for you.
Hopefully we don't break down before then.
Can you do a video of pick and stand locations for different times of deer season, like early season, all parts of the rut, and late season? Yeah, I'm sure we
We'll
could.
do that throughout the season, just
follow
be
the deer
following
too.
along.
That's
yeah,
exactly what we're going to be doing.
The hard part is like talking about all those fine details right now. When they're happening, we'll be talking about them. And we'll be doing podcasts and stuff as well. So,
what stands do you guys like to use? Setups that we got they're okay, but we're usually packing in like 30+ pounds to the woods, and we would ideally like to have it quite a bit lighter than that. If you're going to do much hanging and hunting, recommend finding a stand that's 10 pounds or less if possible.
But also quiet.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
want
can
it quiet.
make set up.
Make modifications to them.
Yeah.
I mean, you can put stealth strips and stuff on them like that. But the big thing is just find the setup that and straps, I would say, that work for you.
We use those old Muddy Blood Sports and Muddy Vantage stands, and they're nice.
Yeah.
But they don't make them anymore. I'm pretty sure.
I liked the Vantage stand with the bracket. Loved that
Yep.
stand. For me, it
I
was
know
what I liked.
Millennium makes a similar to one with that bracket that Zach's
Yeah.
talking about. I got a couple buddies with those that really like
Lone
the
Wolf
Millenniums.
makes some good ones, and
Pretty sure-
XOP.
I'm pretty sure
Dan's
my-
coming out with some new sticks. They're really sweet.
Pretty sure my dad has XOP. It's like a really nice backpack straps with like a lumbar strap, and like I put it on the first time, and I was like, "Geez, like that thing's crazy, super handy." So find a light stand and find a set of backpack straps. It's gonna make your life easier.
How would you
That'd be nice.
determine bedding areas in big open hardwoods? If it's hill country, you can use the example that we talked about earlier in the podcast. They
Turn
will
on that hybrid feature. Look at the topography lines.
look
That'll
at
tell you a
those.
lot.
Look at those layers. That's the nice thing with Onyx is you can just kick those layers on and off. You can look at aerial, you can look at hybrid or topo. And that was kind of the, in the old days of Google Earth when we were using that, it was nice for aerials, but you need that topo
Right.
many times, and you'd have to go find a completely different map and then try to match them up, and that's what's real nice with it, with those different layers. Other
Robert.
than that, with big woods, you're looking for any type of habitat
Yeah, if
transition,
it's
even if
flatter.
it's real small. Like up north, Wisconsin, we got that question the other day in the seminar, like, what do you do? Like, well, there's occasionally a swamp back there in the middle
Yeah.
of all those woods,
I
isn't
think
there?
of my grandpa's setup in northern Wisconsin. That's all it was, is a big swamp. And I mean that it just goes into some of the nastiest habitat you'll imagine, but he was always just set up.
Right.
That swamp goes from hardwoods to smaller willows where the deer are generally bedding, and then into the open marsh. And he had a real good spot back in there. He showed me a long time ago, but I'll never forget it.
Right. James asked, how likely are you guys to try saddle hunting this season? We really want to try them, but we've had some on order now for a while, and we're just waiting on them. Once we get them, if we get them in time, we're going to try them. But we're going to be hunting in, 3.5 weeks. Is that right? While using Onyx on your cell phone, how do you combat cell coverage and dying batteries in cold weather?
That's a really good question, and luckily Onyx has a solution for it. We actually you can download a higher resolution image for a 5-mile block, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
They give you multiple options to download whatever size map that you want, basically.
The smaller the map, or the smaller the size, the higher resolution. I would say most of the time, like at least for me personally on my phone, I'm doing 10s. I've looked, when I have service, I'm looking at it, with Wi-Fi or something, looking at it a little bit more defined, but we're saving that 10-mile block because generally we're bouncing around so much.
So if you know you're going to go to a spot, and even if you don't know if it has service or not, it's just good to be safe and download it. That way you don't get out there. And,
before we go on all these trips, I mean, with turkeys or deer, we save giant blocks, like he said, to our phone with the it's called the off-grid feature on the Onyx Hunt app.
Yep.
We save them all, and really, we use that even if we do have cell coverage because it doesn't drain your battery near as much because it's not constantly
doesn't use your data.
Searching
and
for
as
it.
far as the dying batteries, just with the amount of cameras and stuff that we're usually carrying around, we're carrying little external charging packs, and we plug those into our phones if need
I
be.
mean,
You
mine
can get
hasn't
those-
really had an issue with dying.
No.
I mean, we
And
would hunt with this
if you're,
all day, and
you can put
not
your
have
phone
to charge
on
it.
airplane mode, and if you have the maps downloaded, you can still use them.
Oh, that's a good point. Because, see, all it's doing is taking that downloaded map, and your phone always has a GPS signal, and that's how it's able to still track you through the map. So it's really a sweet feature to have. I mean, especially like those guys that hunt out west for elk and stuff, and way back in the mountains use it all the time.
Yep.
They just download everything.
And I would say, if you are worried about, maybe your what Pruka say his favorite thing to have in the stand is like his phone. If you're one of those guys and you're going to be draining your battery, just get one of those little packs. They're really handy.
And they're cheap.
They're cheap now. Yeah.
All right. We're at an hour, guys. Before we shut this down, let's do our Celebrate the Hunt segment. Jake, we're going to pick on you.
You can't put me on the spot like that.
Yep.
Oh, dude.
We are,
man.
man.
It's so easy.
It's so easy.
I'll talk about the first thing that came to my mind.
All right.
Okay.
That's all that matters.
Here's what it is first. Celebrate the Hunt segment of the podcast is story time. It's where we ask one of our guests, in this case it's Jake, about what his funnest hunt was.
You feel my back all sweaty from being warm?
Or your most memorable hunt.
I'm going to talk about my first buck with a bow. I got out of school early that day. I got called down in the office, which generally wasn't a good thing for me. And it was like maybe 1 or 2 o'clock, and my mom was waiting outside. I was like, well, what's going on? And my grandpa had just called her that day because apparently bucks were running wild, and then she got me out of school early.
How old were you?
Probably 14 or 15.
Okay.
I'd have to look back at what the date was on the picture. And so I go out to the car, and she's like, you're going hunting? She's got all my stuff in the back. I'm like, well, this is cool.
This is the greatest day of my
That
life.
never happened before. It never happened again after that. And we drove just north of the town where I lived, about 10 minutes, and she dropped me off. My grandpa was already sitting, but she told me where to go sit. My grandpa, he tore both of his rotor cuffs in his shoulders, so he didn't hunt in tree stands anymore. So he dug these pit blinds in the willows, and he'd leave his feet, or he'd just put his feet down, and he'd sit straight on the ground, and then he'd put a bunch of stuff over these blinds.
Nice.
And you could only see through the one hole out in front of you. It's kind of like sturgeon spearing for deer is what I always tell people. And I don't know, maybe an hour or 2 went by. I can't remember how long, and I could hear behind me something walking through the marsh grass. And, I'm looking for it, and like I said, you can't see anything.
Right.
And I could tell this thing is real close, within 5-10 yards. And I'm looking up at the deer, and I could see antlers, go right by me. And then he wasn't a big buck or anything, but I had never shot one before. It was like a basket 8. And the thing just came right around in front of me. He had a little scrape tree out in front of me there, started making a scrape. I mean, it was the easiest shot ever. I was shooting, it was right ground level, 8-10 yards, shot him. Then I got up and ran out of the blind so I could see where he was going, and he ran right towards my grandpa and apparently fell right in front of my grandpa, I learned later, but he hunted till the end of the night because the deer were moving so good.
Oh, yeah.
So I just went back up to his buddy's house that we stay at, and I was waiting there for an hour or 2, and he didn't come up or whatever, and it's real dark. He comes up, he's like, did you get one? I'm like, I got one. He had to at least heard it. And, he watched the thing fall right in front of him, but he let me track it and everything. But, yep, that's my Celebrate the Hunt. Pretty sweet.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
I think the beauty of the Celebrate the Hunt is it's so not limiting.
You can talk about
we could
anything.
do I know at least us three just alone we could do this for hours.
Yeah.
Oh,
We
I
do
have
it for
40
hours.
favorite stories, like that buck that you killed a few years ago when me and Mike were out there tracking online.
Yeah.
We'll save that for another one.
We got plenty of time.
We'll
Yep.
celebrate the hunt a bunch.
Yep. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. That's going to wrap it up for this podcast. And before we leave you, if there's anybody still listening that wants to check out the OnX Hunt app, you can just go over to onxmaps.com. We can save you 20% if you use our promo code. It is all caps THP, and it's only good at onxmaps.com.
Boom.
That's it.
That's it.
You mentioned that
Hey, wait a minute.
there's
Greg.
questions that we couldn't get to in the podcast. We'll try to get to them.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll be typing back to you guys.
That's a
if we
good
didn't get to
point
it on
Greg
the
just
podcast.
made. All the questions that we didn't get to, we will answer them.
Thanks for all the questions, guys.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks
Appreciate
everybody
it.
for joining us. We really appreciate it. This mapping series has went over really well with you guys, and we appreciate all the feedback and all the support.